Making things by hand might seem like a simple hobby, something quiet, something relaxing. But for many people, it becomes something much deeper, something that helps them through grief, through illness, through some of the most difficult moments in their lives. So, how can something so simple feel so meaningful? In this video, I want to explore that question. We'll have a look at why making things gives us a sense of control, how it helps us process difficult emotions, why it creates purpose, and why it connects us to ourselves and to others. Many of the stories I'll share in this video come from comments you left under a recent video where I talked about what happens in our brain when we create things. I was deeply moved reading through all of the comments, and they made me look at knitting and making things by hand in general in a completely different way. Today, most of us spend far more time consuming than creating. We scroll, we watch, we read, but we rarely make something tangible with our hands. And maybe that's exactly why creating feels so different. And the first thing it seems to give us is something actually very simple: a sense of control. When life feels uncertain, overwhelming, or simply too much, making something small with your hands can bring you back into something steady. And someone shared a story exactly about this. She said she started knitting after a devastating earthquake in her country, Turkey, where tens of thousands of people had died. And even though her own family was safe, she felt deeply overwhelmed. She joined a group knitting scarves for people affected by the disaster. And she said something very powerful. As I counted the stitches, my tears slowly decreased. She felt useful, calmer, and she said knitting helped her stay present in a moment that otherwise felt unbearable. And I think that is something that many of us recognize, because when you're knitting or crocheting or making anything by hand, your mind has somewhere to go. Your hands are moving and your mind is following, and suddenly things feel a little bit more manageable. But control is only one part of the story, because many people mentioned something even deeper: emotions. Someone wrote to me about what she called a grief blanket, because she had had a very difficult year, and one day she just decided to start knitting using whatever yarn she had at home, and she simply kept going for 16 weeks. And when she finished, she said it had become one of her most treasured belongings, because somehow she had turned loss into something tangible, something she could hold. She wrote, "I created something beautiful out of destruction." And I think that captures something very important, because sometimes when we simply don't have the words for what we feel, our hands can carry it instead. Another person shared that after losing her husband, knitting was one of the only things in her life that felt steady, something familiar, something she could still control. And she said her mind would quiet, and even the fear and loneliness would soften just a little while she was knitting. And then there was another story that stayed with me in a different way. Someone grew up in a very difficult environment, and for a long time she struggled just to survive. But when she had children, she started knitting for them. And she said something very simple yet deeply touching. "It was the first time in my life I felt real happiness." Years later, she realized that knitting had been one of the things that helped her through. And today she says she is living proof that making something with your hands can be part of your healing process. And maybe this is where something shifts, because at some point it becomes less about coping and more about something else: purpose. There's a story that stayed with me that I already mentioned in my previous video. Joy, who is part of my online community called the Handmade Wardrobe Circle, shared a story about her mother-in-law who lives in a retirement center, And over time, she had become very lonely and withdrawn. And they had tried everything: books, puzzles, an iPad, but nothing really helped. Until one day, they gave her a knitting project. And everything changed. She became present and engaged and proud of what she was making. And she had something meaningful to return to every day, a quiet sense of purpose. And I think that matters more than we often realize, because purpose doesn't always have to be something big. Sometimes it can just be something that we work on, something to focus on, to be proud of, and something to care about. And for some people, it becomes even more than that. It becomes part of their identity. Someone left a comment who had gone through a serious health crisis. She nearly died and she had lost all ability to knit. Even simple patterns felt unbearable, and of course she was devastated. But slowly she started again, one small project and then another, learning new techniques, and with each step something came back. Not just the skill, but her confidence. She said, "I might not be able to do everything I used to, but I can still knit." And that meant everything. Because sometimes making something with our hands is not about, or not only about, what we create, it's also about who we are. And in many cases, it can also connect us to something beyond ourselves, to other people, to the past, to something larger. One person shared that she likes to crochet blankets and gift them to children in need. And she said it gives her a sense of purpose, but also a feeling that she can bring comfort to someone else. And I think that's something very beautiful, because every stitch carries time, attention, and care. And sometimes that is exactly what we want to give. So when we take a step back, something becomes very clear. Making things with our hands gives us a sense of control. It helps us process difficult emotions. It creates a sense of purpose, and it connects us to ourselves and to others. And maybe that's why it feels so meaningful, because in a world where so much of our time is spent consuming, making things by hand is a quiet act of creation. And I think that is something we need now more than ever. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, I think you're also going to like this one, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye.